Okay, let's talk about something you probably don't think about twice. Trash. We're going to peel back the lid on how everyday garbage, the stuff you throw out, somehow became a massive bargaining chip in a trade war between Canada and the United States. Seriously, this is a wild story.
So let's start with a number. Get this, 3.46 million tons. That's how much garbage travels from Ontario, Canada into Michigan landfills every single year. I mean, just try to picture that. It's like a nonstop convoy of semi-trucks filled to the brim with trash, stretching for hundreds and hundreds of miles. It's a lot. And that leads to the big question, right? Why on earth is this happening? Why would Michigan become the final resting place for a literal river of Canadian waste? Well, the answer is a crazy mix of simple economics, high-stakes politics, and a clock that is ticking down fast. To really get to the bottom of this, we have to do what you always do, follow the money. This whole situation kicked off because of a pretty straightforward economic problem and a giant headache looming for Canada's biggest province. And here is where it all clicks. Look at this. To dump 1 ton of trash in Ontario, you're looking at over $100. But to dump that same ton in Michigan, it was just 36 cents. It was a total no-brainer. It was literally cheaper to load up a truck and drive it across an international border than it was to just deal with it at home. Now, you can imagine Michigan lawmakers weren't exactly thrilled about their state becoming a cheap dumping ground. So what do? They proposed a massive fee hike from 36 cents all the way up to $5 a ton. That's a 1,288% increase. I mean, that's not just a price adjustment. That's a message, a very clear message to Ontario saying, hey, maybe it's time to deal with your own trash. And this right here shows you why Ontario was so desperate. The province is staring down what's called a capacity cliff. If things stay as they are, with trash still flowing to Michigan, they're completely out of landfill space by 2037. But, and this is the scary part for them, if that U.S. border suddenly slams shut, they are full by 2034. That clock is ticking, and it created a huge vulnerability. And it's that vulnerability that turned this kind of boring waste management problem into a full-blown geopolitical firestorm. Because when trade tensions between the US and Canada really started to boil over, this quiet river of garbage suddenly became a really powerful political weapon. So, in one corner, you have Ontario Premier Doug Ford. And he didn't just play defense. He went on the offensive, taking a really confrontational stance and publicly pushing back against U.S. trade policies. He basically framed it as a fight for economic survival for people on both sides of the border. And then in the other corner, you had President Trump using critical infrastructure as a bargaining chip. He threatened to stop a multi-billion-dollar bridge connecting Ontario and Michigan from opening. It just showed that absolutely everything was on the negotiating table, turning what should be economic policy into this high-stakes game of chicken. So what was Ontario's move? Well, Premier Ford's government passed a bill to fast-track the creation of new landfills. They called it a push for economic self-reliance. But really, it was a geopolitical defense mechanism, a clear attempt to build up their own defenses and be less vulnerable to all that pressure from the U.S. And believe me, the stakes here were incredibly high. During this trade dispute, goods that didn't comply with the new USMCA trade deal were getting hit with tariffs of 25%. Some industries, like steel and aluminum, faced tariffs as high as 50%. This was some serious financial pressure. And yet, somehow, the trash just kept on flowing. So how? How did millions of tons of Canadian garbage manage to dodge these massive tariffs? Well, the answer, like it so often is, was buried in the fine print. Deep inside the new trade deal, the USMCA, there was a loophole that created a kind of paper shield for the entire waste industry. The magic words are originating goods. Under the trade deal, if a product is wholly obtained or produced in Canada, the US, or Mexico, it gets a pass. It qualifies for duty-free treatment. It's a rule designed to encourage everyone to buy and sell stuff made right here in North America. And here's the brilliant part. The agreement officially classifies waste, household and business trash, as a product that is wholly obtained in the country where it was thrown out. So that old coffee cup from a cafe in Toronto, for trade purposes, it's considered a 100% Canadian product. And just like that, it's exempt from all those tariffs that were hitting other industries. Now, to claim this exemption, an exporter has to fill out this document, a certificate of origin. And I know, it looks complicated, but it really just boils down to 3 simple things. First, you say who is involved, the exporter or the importer and so on. Second, you describe the goods, in this case, trash, and you give it a special trade code. And third, you sign on the dotted line, certifying that it meets the origin rules. This piece of paper is the shield that kept that river of trash flowing completely tariff-free.
Okay, so while all the politicians were fighting over who has to take out the trash, some really smart innovators were asking a totally different question. They were looking at this whole mess and thinking, what if trash isn't a liability to be buried? What if it's a raw material just waiting to be refined?
And this slide really shows you that huge shift in thinking. The old way is linear, right? You make something, use it, you pay someone to haul it away and stick it in a hole. It's a liability. But this new model, which is being pioneered by companies in Canada like 905 Wood, it's circular. They see waste as a raw material, an asset, something that can be transformed into incredibly valuable new products. They call it the digital refinery concept. So 905 Wood goes out and collects wood from construction sites. But they don't call it trash pickup, they call it feedstock acquisition. They're mining for ore. Then they use a ton of digital tools to manage the logistics and turn that wood residue into amazing new things. And here's the really cool part, how they actually do it. Step 1, they collect the wood waste. But step 2 is where the magic happens. They use high-precision 3D scanners to create a perfect digital copy of every single piece, creating a digital inventory. And then for step 3, they use robotic arms to process that material, turning discarded wood into beautiful furniture and architectural pieces. It's a complete reimagining of the entire value chain. So all of this brings us back to the big picture. This whole conflict between Ontario and Michigan, it really shines a light on a fundamental question about how we think about waste and resources and even borders. So I'll just leave you with this one final question to think about. As raw materials get more and more expensive and our planet has less and less space to bury our problems, what does our future look like? Are we going to build more political walls to fight over whose problem the trash is? Or are we going to build technological bridges, like these digital refineries, that can turn our biggest liabilities into our most valuable assets?